Good morning, Norma.
Good morning, Helen. How are you today?
I'm all right. Clearly not as fresh as I thought I was, but there we go.
Yeah. We'll get the energy and juices flowing this morning, Helen. Don't worry.
Exactly, thank you. I'm really looking forward to this session, Norma, and particularly about the targeting element as well. So I will pass over to you and let you take the helm. Thanks very much, Norma.
Fabulous. Thanks very much, Helen. So, 2 seconds. I am just bringing up the presentation for you. There, fabulous. So, good morning, everybody. It's wonderful to be here with you all this morning, and I'm really looking forward to our second masterclass session in this series of 3 masterclasses overall. And don't worry if you couldn't be with us in the previous session. I am going to do a recap this morning for you, so you'll be able to catch up if you weren't able to join us last week. So LinkedIn, wow, such an amazing tool and such a fabulous resource for you, particularly where most of us are working from home at the minute and perhaps getting to the stage where we are really starting to think about our international business development and what we're doing in terms of our lead generation and how we're reaching out to existing customers and new customers and actually keeping that dialogue going. LinkedIn is a really powerful network, over 690 million people worldwide now across 200 countries and regions, and something that you really can't afford to ignore anymore. Gary Vaynerchuk, the big social media guru, talked about how it was such an essential part of social media and what you're doing to win new business, whereas 2-3 years ago, it didn't even really feature in his book. So I've been working on LinkedIn since 2006. It's one of my main business tools. It generates huge amounts of new business for me and my a couple of companies, and is just a fabulous tool for me to maintain relationships and keep in touch with people. And I hear a lot of different things from people about LinkedIn and oh, how wonderful it is. Sometimes I hear people saying that LinkedIn's not that great, and sometimes they're talking about, oh, you know, it doesn't work so well for them. So my promise to you today is I'm going to be showing you tips and tricks and tools on LinkedIn that you can use to get the best from it. It is essentially your personal private networking tool. So what I would stress to you is that actually face-to-face principles of doing business apply just as much, if not even more so, on LinkedIn. Integrity, authenticity, and actually respect and dealing with people as if you would when they are face-to-face with you. They're some of the principles on LinkedIn. And when it comes down to it, we're looking at building trusted, sustainable long-term relationships with the people that we are connecting with. Now, we're all short on time. Time is absolutely of the essence. And my promise to you is 12 minutes a day is all you need, really. That's 5 times 12 is 1 hour per week to stay on top of your LinkedIn and make sure that's working really hard for you. I will attempt to keep the terminology really simple today. Helen and I will be doing Q&As after each section. So I'd rather not take questions during each section, but please drop your questions into the chat and Helen and I will try and cover as many of those questions as possible, and we will send out responses to everything after the session. So please make this fully interactive and let's do some sharing and caring. You will have hopefully received a workbook. This is what it looks like. Some of the slides are captured in there. We will be sending out a subset of the bullet point slides, which you can use as checklists after the session. If you don't have your workbook at hand, don't worry. You can make those notes on a separate sheet, and I will be calling out lots of actions because I really want you to get down to getting some good results from the webinar this morning. So for those of you who were with us last week, How did you get on with your homework? I've had some really great messages from lots of you and some questions, and it seems as though you've been really busy over this long weekend. And for those of you that weren't with us, let's just do a fairly quick recap of that first webinar. And it was focused very much on knowing your audience, what's your niche, what are your specialisms, and how do I improve my profile so that it's making a really great first impression. We looked at LinkedIn's social selling index, and on the screen here you can see the URL to be able to check that out. That will give you a number across 4 different criteria. So please go ahead, check that out, jot down that benchmark, that score in your LinkedIn profile. The SSI index is updated pretty much every day by LinkedIn. And when you start making improvements on your profile, you'll see that index going up quite rapidly. So it's a great one to keep an eye on. On your dashboard, which is visible on your profile page, and it's private to you, there are a couple of things that are really important. One is that we get you to all-star status. That's what these webinars are all about. And you will see the numbers and metrics on your profile in terms of who's viewing your profile, post views, search appearances. Jot those numbers down too, guys, because you will hopefully see those creeping up with time and starting to deliver well for you. We looked at this really cool tool on the mobile, and in the search bar at the top here, you will see the little squares. When you touch on there, it comes across to the screen on the right-hand side. You have a QR code that instantly allows people to connect with you. And if some of you have your mobile phone at the ready, you could hover over that with the left-hand side, which is your scanner, and it will immediately bring up my profile. You can personalize the message, and it's just an instant connection. Great for presentations and workshops, or if you're at exhibitions, for actually getting those connections through quickly. We also talked about my 5 principles. I'm going to go through those quickly. They are in your workbook as well. People buy from people that they trust. And one of the key principles on LinkedIn is actually building up that basis of trust. Trust with your audience and trust with LinkedIn and the search engines, because that will get your profile prominent and make sure that you are getting the very best, not just from your profile and your company pages, but from the activities that you're undertaking on LinkedIn. People are going to check you out on the internet. And the most important question is not which social media resource should I be using, but where are my target customers and how can I reach out to them and engage with them? But no matter what, people will check you out on the internet, whether you're on this resource or not. They're going to be going out looking for you. In fact, 90% of people check you out before they make contact with you and have probably made their mind up about whether they're going to do business with you before they even pick up the phone or get in touch with you. So it's important that you've got a great profile that makes a fabulous first impression. And people only read the headlines. The average attention span on the web and on your LinkedIn profile when people pull it up is a couple of seconds. It's not long. So we need to master the art of being explicit, creating really great headlines, and getting impactful messages across that are keyword rich in a very short time frame. So we want to make sure that our resources are working the hardest for us that they possibly can. And quite a big one that we're going to be focusing on a lot today is putting yourself in your customers' shoes. So not telling customers what you do, but telling customers what you do or can do for them. What are the benefits in doing business with you and engaging with you and buying your services or your products? And we really want to put ourselves in our customers' shoes and make sure that we're presenting what we do from their perspectives and really engaging and focusing on the values and the benefits to them. And finally, strengthen the brand of you. Your LinkedIn profile is all about you, your skills, your expertise, the quality of the products and services you offer, and we need to get on our soapbox and we need to shout about that and get strong, impactful, friendly, accessible messages across in a great way to your main audience. And as I mentioned, one of the key things we're going to focus on today is your target customers. Who are the people that you really want to reach out to and engage with on LinkedIn? And how can we get really clear about that and make sure that we are reaching them and engaging them in meaningful conversation and developing quality, sustainable relationships that will hopefully convert for you. So there are a couple of small things that we shared. In the top of your navigation bar up here in the black bar, you should see on your LinkedIn profile a little picture of yourself saying me up here. And when you click on that, it brings up this navigation, and there are two aspects on there we talked about last week that are really important: your settings and privacy in the help section. And I invited you all to check that out and make sure that you really have got those set up in terms of how you're sharing your connections, how you're being communicated with, that meets your needs, and that you know where to go for help and to find out how to do things on LinkedIn if you're not sure. So we looked at knowing your audience, and I'm going to expand on that shortly. We also spent a little bit of time talking about what is your niche, because as a generalist, you will not have great impact. Your marketing will become much harder. If you really express what you can do in terms of your specialisms and your niche, and you're targeting people who will be interested in that, your marketing will work really hard for you. And I gave people who attended the workshop, the webinar workshop last week, a little bit of homework to go out and think about your keywords. What words are you going to be using in your about section and your summary? And making sure that you're clear about the keywords that describe you, what you do, what your offer is, that represent the words that people will be typing into LinkedIn to find you, to find your company, to find what it is that you offer. And I have one new piece of news for you guys. The about section, we've been talking about 2,000 characters for that. LinkedIn have now increased that to 2,600 characters. So you've got a little bit more in this fourth section here to expand on the value of doing business with you, of engaging with you. So make the most of it. Make sure you get some of those keywords up there. And of course, during the lockdown, and whilst it is still easing, you may want to do a buddy interview, because when you're looking at these keywords and trying to understand what your keywords are, rather than sitting there and writing those down, do a buddy interview. Talk to someone who you can explain about your company, about you, about your professional career, what you've done in life, and they can jot down the keywords for you, and you can do a swap and share. If you record that session, it would be really helpful. That makes writing that we are sending out to people. And this is essentially a list of key elements in your profile that you need to get right. Some of them we covered last week. We're going to be doing more of this over the next 2 webinars. So it would be great if you could work through that. Have a look at the recording last week if you weren't able to be with us, and make sure that you've got an outstanding profile that makes a brilliant first impression. So that was last week, guys. This week, we're going to be looking at connecting to your A-listers. Who are your A-list target clients? Who are the people that you really want to connect to? And we're going to be looking at profiling them and your organizations in depth. We are also going to be looking at how to connect with them. And once you get connected with them, then what? What are you going to do with those people? So it's really important that we take an in-depth look at that, so that you're understanding how to target people, how to connect with them, and how to communicate with them. And I've got a fabulous tool at the end of the session that will help you get the right tone and approach in your communications to new prospects and clients. So we're going to go through that today, and then next week we're going to be focusing on generating leads that really convert, and some advanced techniques on LinkedIn. Having got your profile and your connections in order, we'll then be looking at building reach, reputation, and results. So very briefly, Helen, can I invite you back in? Have we got any questions on that first recap and introduction session?
We don't, Norma. We had a couple of moments where you froze a little bit there, but we got you back. But we haven't had any questions as yet. So just a reminder for everyone, don't use the chat. Please use the Q&A for any questions. And we'll certainly get those answered as we go through and have the different breakouts.
Okay.
But good news about the About section, Norma, so that you can get plenty of
great?
there. Definitely.
600 extra characters, and it doesn't mean that you have to complete the About section in its entirety, but you have got more space there for keywords and to get some of those important messages across. So for those of you that do want to do that, just remember the top couple of sentences that appear all the time are that most important introduction to your About section, and keep it personal, keep it friendly, keep it accessible as though you're talking to someone is my top tip for that part of your LinkedIn profile.
Fabulous. No, we haven't got any questions as yet, Norma, so I don't know if you want to...
I'll continue, and I'll come back to you after the next session, Helen. Thank you. Okay. So 7 steps to LinkedIn mastery, and all about this aspect of making a great first impression. So I really want to take a much deeper dive into getting to know your audience. Who are the people that you would really love to attract to your LinkedIn profile and to start a conversation with, to start doing business with on LinkedIn? So let's take a closer look at that. And last week I shared this slide with you, and we agreed that we really want to be focusing on those A-list clients. They're the people who are your prime targets. They're well connected to your target market, and they're going to help you achieve your short to medium term goals. Your B-listers, they're great connections. You may have a good conversation with them. Not necessarily people that you want to engage with immediately, but maybe in the medium to long term. So you're going to connect with them. You're going to certainly keep them in the mix. Your C-listers, you'll have some initial contact. You may connect with them, you may not. You may just invite them to your blog or your newsletter. They're unlikely to achieve your goals, but it is always worthwhile looking at those C-listers to see if they have a broader audience that you would love to check in with and perhaps access some of their connections to benefit you. So make sure you take a close look at those C-listers and see whether it's worth connecting to them. Now, in your workbook on page 5, you will find a full page version of this particular screen. And I really want to start delving into this a little bit further. So this is all about your business and professional development, with you at the center of this. On the right hand side, we have got business development, and that's top of our mind. I guess if I said to all of you, what's your key priority at the moment, it would be bringing in new business and converting that into sales. So in terms of your business development, in the bottom right hand corner here, we have your customers. And on LinkedIn, that is a prime objective of ours, to attract people who we can convert into customers, to start engaging with them, connecting with them, engaging with them, talking to them, sharing content, and hopefully establishing such a good quality relationship that we can then convert that into sales. In the top bracket here, we have your introducers, and they are intermediaries, sometimes they're called referrers, introducers, people that have a large number of connections who represent your A-list target clients, and by making one connection to that introducer, you are able to access a lot of their connections. So introducers are really important, and a great way, if you can connect with some of these introducers on LinkedIn, a great way of getting access to all of their connections if their target clients match yours. So 2 key types of people to be thinking about connecting with and engaging with on LinkedIn. On the left-hand side, we've got professional development. And this is something that people tend to think about, because on LinkedIn, we need to be creating quite a lot of content. And we're going to be focusing on content in the next session, but actually finding out who in your sector, who in your area is creating great content, whose day job it is to create good quality content. It's important to connect with them and to follow them, because you will be able to access some of their content, you'll be able to get ideas, and you will be able to take some of their content in line with best practice, use it for your own content, accrediting the source, of course, and providing backward links to their websites or their resources. But that content will significantly help you in developing quality content for your articles, for your posts, and obviously for your web and your blog, if that indeed is the case. So watching out, finding out who are the great content creators in your sector and making sure that you are connecting with them and following with them is something really valuable to do on LinkedIn. And then finally, in this professional development area of the screen, we have your influencers. These are people that you follow, that you keep an eye on, that if you can, you want to be connected with them. If not, you're going to be following them on LinkedIn, who may write books, they may do great presentations, they may be invited to big events as speakers. You will be looking up to them as people who are top of their game, who can share with you all of the innovations and new happenings and creations, and maybe bring thought leadership and fresh thinking to the world that you work in. So again, it's really important that you are following those people. Now, in your workbook on page 5, and I'll hold it up for those of you that don't have it there, you will see these sections set out in your workbook. And what I'm inviting you to do for homework is, in each of these areas, pick 2 to 3 really good examples of customers, introducers, content creators, and influencers, and just jot down, do a little bit of research on LinkedIn, jot down you know, the sorts of job titles they give themselves, jot down how they're describing themselves, maybe some keywords and the types of organizations that they are working for. Because when you start doing your A-list client research in depth, these prompts will stand you in very good stead. And this will help us to really start thinking about proactively, from a strategic perspective, starting to build up those A-list target clients. Now, what I'd like to do now is focus on your target customers in a lot more depth and really hone in on this subject of creating customer profiles. And you may have done this already for your website. If not, this will stand you in good stead and overall for your marketing activities. But it's really important to get to grips with your customers and understand who they are and what makes them tick, where they hang out, where you can find them, what content will inspire them to engage with you, how they describe themselves, what are their preferred social media resources, what type of marketing do they like, what kind of messages would really get them paying attention and listening to you and engaging with you. So we go through a process called customer profiling or developing customer archetypes. Some people call them avatars. They are essentially all the same thing. And I take through my clients, when I start working with them, this process of developing customer profiles, which is very productive and very valuable. It does take a bit of time to do this and to get it right, but it will completely transform your marketing and your engagement on LinkedIn, and make sure that whatever you are creating by way of approaches and content hits the nail on the head. It hits the spot. Why? Because you've put yourself in your customer's shoes, you've taken the time to understand them and to understand their wants and needs and preferences online. So it's important that we get this right. So the first job for you is to look back at the types of companies that you typically engage with, and to start profiling those companies. And what I tend to ask my customers to do is to look at doing some database analysis. Go back over the last 1 to 3 years and take a really close look at your customer database if you can. And this is relevant for B2B, and in some cases for business to business, in some cases for business to consumer as well, if you're dealing with retailers or wholesalers, or you simply want to get to grips a bit more with your customer organizations and the decision makers within those organizations. So first step, go back over your database and do a database review. Set the criteria for the review and the type of information that's important to you that you want to be gathering. It could be the size of business, the turnover of the business, the sector they're working in, their location, how many staff they have. Maybe it's the products and services that they are producing. It could be other elements such as, do I enjoy working with those types of organization? Have I got a lot of experience and expertise in that area? It could be down to things like, are they good payers? Do they pay on time? Or am I having to wait 90 or 120 days to get my money? So think hard, and you might want to brainstorm with other people about what criteria are important for you, and go through your customer database, choosing a good and reasonable number of clients to look at. And then when you've worked out who are the people that you really want to work with, take a closer look at those attributes, because there will be themes and similarities between them that start to emerge. And you will then be able to get clear about what that review is actually telling you. And what I will be inviting you to do once you can see what sort of information is emerging from that data is to take those customers and to group them, to actually start putting them into the top 3 to 5 groups that you would like to focus on. Because you're not going to be able to focus on all of the different groups at the same time, but you will be able to focus on 3 or 5 top groups that really represent the people that are the ones that are the really juicy, valuable contracts or pieces of business that you want to get, that are the easiest and most pleasurable to work with, that are very accessible, that you have lots of experience working with, that you want to focus on in the first instance. Now, just because you are focusing on 3 to 5 different company groups doesn't mean to say that you're not going to be able to do business with all of the other companies that you've engaged with. In the contrary, however, it gives you a focus both on your website, in your marketing, and particularly on your LinkedIn profile, because you will be highlighting these groups. And I generally insist, in the nicest possible way with clients that I'm working with, that we do this database analysis. And I have never yet, of the many clients I've worked with, had anybody who hasn't come back to me and said, wow, that was truly amazing. I thought I knew exactly what organizations I was working with and where my business is coming from. But actually, now that I've done this work, it's telling me new information that is going to be really valuable for my company and for my marketing activities. So do get to grips with this, guys. It's something that's really worthwhile spending a little bit of time on. And actually, on the back of your customer database analysis, hopefully you'll get renewed enthusiasm to start making contact with these companies and going out and reinvigorating your marketing if some of them have sort of not heard from you in a while, which I know happens to the best of us. So once you've done that database analysis, the key question for those top groups that you've decided to prioritize is, who is the typical decision maker or makers for each company group? And there may actually be two different decision makers in any one company. For example, I had a company who were trend spotters for retail, and they had two different decision makers within a department store. One was the head of procurement, the other was the head of design. The head of procurement wanted to buy what was safe last year and what sold well. The head of design wanted to buy what was new and sexy and interesting that nobody else had. And they were two very different positions, and obviously two very different sets of approaches and messages to each of those individuals. So they created two profiles for decision makers within the one company, because they never really knew who would win out in terms of that argument. I've worked with companies in recruitment, international recruitment, in the oil and gas sector. They profiled their companies, and they had two key decision makers. One was the head of HR, the other was the chief technical officer. And of course, an approach to what was typically a female head of HR or a predominantly male technical officer in terms of their messaging and how they were working was again very, very different, as you can imagine. So we had two different decision maker or customer profiles within each of those organizations. So I invite you to go back. This is an action point for your action plan. Take a look at your customer databases, do that analysis work, have a look, see what emerges from the data. I often like to do this with post-it notes on a blank wall. You can move things around. It's often useful to then put these into a bar chart or a pie chart if you've got bigger numbers to work with, and just see what emerges from that data for you. If you haven't got a year or longer, if you're quite a new business, then I think doing some research and working on your own assumptions and doing the best you can until you've got a few months or a year or so under your belt, and then you can come back and revisit this. So do the best that you can with what you have is the message there. So how do we then go about profiling those decision makers? What makes those decision makers tick? How can I reach them? How do I need to talk to them by way of tone and approach? Who are they? What are they like? Have they typically got an assistant or a secretary who's going to block me from getting through to them? Are they IT savvy? Can I reach them digitally, or am I going to have to create brochures to send through to them? And what are their challenges and what are their aspirations over the year? And how can I develop messages that they will say, whoa, that sounds interesting. I'm going to take a look at this and start looking into this company or these individuals and think maybe about getting in touch with them and doing business with them. Now, I have developed my own way of helping companies to do these customer profiling exercises. And what I use to start developing my system is a set of resources that are freely available from HubSpot, which is an organization you might have heard of. And these are HubSpot's profile templates. They are available online, and I will be showing you the URL shortly so that you can download these. They're in PowerPoint format, so you can use these to create your own set of resources. And they are really, really useful to help you get to grips with your own customer profiling. So I'll run you through this particular example and just show you the different sections, and we'll talk through this. And then at the end of this session, we'll have a chance to have a chat about them, any thoughts that you might have about your customer profiling exercise. So HubSpot here have profiled Sally, and we give your customer profiles. So these are people who typify decision makers in these customer groups. They are probably going to be your ideal target decision maker within those organizations. So we're going to go through that, but we're going to give them a name because we want to get to grips with them. We want to put ourselves in their shoes and really understand what makes them tick. So we give them a name. You can use a picture. Sometimes it is helpful to think about the best clients that you know and either use one of them or an amalgamation of them. But this is not profiling this person. This is creating a profile for that typical decision maker. So it's a bit more generic. So here we're looking at the head of human resources, the background, job, career path and family. She's worked at the same company for years, married with 2 kids, etc. In terms of demographics, typically head of HR is female, age 35 to 45, has a good income and lives in suburbia. In terms of identifiers, you know, what are her communication preferences, her demeanor? She's calm, probably has an assistant screening calls, asks to receive collateral by mail and printed. That may be different from person to person, but they're using that as an example. And then we get on to something that is really important. And these are things that I tend to ask every business that I'm going in to work with is, you know, and my question often is, what are the top 3 things that you would like to achieve this year? And it's a question that everybody can give you the answer to generally. What are your goals? And here they're asking for primary goal or secondary goal. I like 3s. So I tend to ask people for the 3 things. What are the top 3 goals that you would like to tell me that you've achieved if I came to see you this time next year? And jot those down. And then adversely, if I were to say, what are the 3 things that you are most worried about this year? What are the key challenges that you envisage? Again, what would those be? And at this point in time, we are working on your knowledge and experience of these people, your assumptions, and we're jotting down your thoughts here. The next section is really interesting. What can we do to help Sally meet her goals and to help Sally solve the challenges that she has? And you can see in this section, we're starting to turn her priorities into messages that will respond to her goals and her challenges. So we're starting to tell Sally what we can do for her, not just giving her a list of all of the products and services that we are able to provide her with. And this, again, takes a little bit of time to get right, but it's well worth spending a wee bit of time actually honing this and crafting some good statements. Now, after this, I'm going to be suggesting that you actually go and talk to your typical customers to refine your profile, but you may already have collected some real quotations here. We did this exercise with a lovely company up in southeast Northumberland called the All-in-One Company. They had meticulously collected all testimonials and quotations from all of their customers in this wonderful book. And we used these, oh, it was fabulous. We used these for keywords and key phrases and to pull out some real quotations, and went back to the people and asked if we could use these in some of our content and marketing, which was incredibly valuable. So we're going to be looking at real quotes about the goals and the challenges and other aspects, and rich source of data this. So if you're not already doing that, this is another one for your action plan to actually capture those testimonials and quotations somewhere where you can easily and readily access them. Now, the next section is really important and valuable in a sales context. What would be the common objections that somebody might raise to that offer, to completing that sale? Why wouldn't they buy your product or service, or what questions might they have? And again, working from your own knowledge and experience, jot down as many of these as you possibly can. In Sally's case, she's worried about losing data, transitioning to a new system, and about the cost and time needed to train an entire company on a new system. So obviously from a sales perspective, if you're not answering those objections, you're probably not going to be able to convert into a sale. Then once you have got all of these elements written down, you can then start thinking about your marketing message. What is that core message, and how do you describe the solution that you are presenting to your persona? And here, integrated HR database management, quite simple. You could expand on that for your products or services. And they have then created an elevator pitch, which answer some of Sally's challenges, aspirations, and some of the objections that she has brought up that you've become aware of whilst you've been doing this profiling exercise. So that hopefully is a description of how you can start getting to grips with your customer profiling. My colleague and now co-director, Claire at Snowden Consulting, I actually took her quite a few years back through this exercise, and she said things like, at the time, you know, it helped bring great clarity to what she was doing. It gave her an opportunity with some independent input, and do this with a buddy by all means, to reflect on the business, but really to get to grips with understanding her ideal client, who they are, what they do, what issues they have, what support they need, and more importantly, how Claire was able to really target those prime customers and bring great value to them using specific language and examples that actually they had used when talking to her. So this is really rich pickings for your keywords and key phrases, guys. Really, really important when you come down to doing those advanced searches. So descriptions of this process and the templates are available here at HubSpot, and we'll be sending the slides out, a reduced version of the slides out after this session, how to create personas. HubSpot have got a lot of information on there for business to business and for business to consumer, so you'll be able to delve into that. But my invitation to you for this week is to really do that customer database analysis and to start thinking about developing these customer profiles for yourselves. This is such important work. I can't stress the importance of doing this and getting it right enough. So take some time out, guys, and get this right. Now, what I wanted to show you is just the value of really honing in on keywords and key phrases that your customers are using whilst you are doing this. And we looked at LinkedIn's advanced search in a little bit last week. Your advanced search box is here in the top left-hand corner. And what I'm going to introduce to you today is something called Boolean searches. You may have heard of those before, and I've got an explanation coming up where, for example, we're using in parentheses and inverted commas, we are using head of human resources. So if we don't use those inverted commas in LinkedIn, it will give us all the results with head in, with human in, and with resources in. So we get a lot of dross that we're not actually looking for. We're actually looking for people with the phrase head of human resources in their profile. So when I pop that in here, because I know from my profiling that's typically what Sally calls herself, I am getting 66,000 results. However, through the customer profiling, I also discovered that some people actually call them HR director. So when I do a search based on HR director using these extra filters here, you will see that I've got 173,000 results. And when I type in HR manager, which may or may not be relevant as my target client, but I've done the search to show you how it looks. Again, in inverted commas, 731,000 results have appeared in my LinkedIn search. They represent people who've got that term HR manager in their profile. Now, you can then go into these filters and filter down further, putting in and I would recommend you use second degree connection, looking at locations. Maybe instead of UK, you want to restrict it to the Leeds area or to the Durham area. So you can filter these searches further so that you are getting a workable list of prospects to go at. And this is what these filters look like here. So search terminology at the top, second degree connection here. In the United Kingdom is what I used. That's why such a big numbers come up, but you may want to use the town you're in, which LinkedIn will allow you to do. I am choosing an industry. So I want people within the food production sector because they're the clients that I'm working with currently. I just want English language profiles, and I'm not going to use schools or any of the other filters. I click on apply here at the top and it gives me that particular search result. So have a further play around as well with these search filters. They're really important and they will help you hone in and target even further into the A-list clients that you are actually looking for. So when I apply these filters here to HR director, I get an eminently workable list of prospects of 29 results. And don't forget, once you have developed that search within LinkedIn that has searched everybody in your network up to today, you can then create a search alert here, and you can have up to 3 searches that email. The email from LinkedIn goes out weekly into your inbox, and basic profiles can have 3 saved searches at any given point in time. If you want to change one, then you have to delete it and add a new one. Really valuable. This is LinkedIn doing your business development work for you guys. So make sure that you're using this facility and getting the most out of it. In terms of Boolean searches, in the help section, remember up here in the top, when you click on that little round circle that says me, there's a help section in there. You could go in there and just type in Boolean search, but these are the top level things you need to know about doing Boolean searches, and these work in Google as well as in LinkedIn. You can combine keywords with operators such as and, not, and or. They must be written in capital letters to work. And the overall order to precedence is as follows. So in quotation marks, that is the first important element, HR director, for example. Then using parentheses or brackets, HR director, but not manager, for example. And you would write that in this particular way. You can use not, so a director, not a manager, for example. Or you can have director and manager because you want both. And you can also combine that with an or, HR or human resources, or, for example, staff management. So have a play around with this. Go onto LinkedIn, have a read of the Boolean search description so that you get more to grips with that. There's certainly a lot more examples there. And you can use this in your advanced searches to search for your preferred customers. Now, it's important because this is different in Google. Don't use a plus sign, which you can do in Google. You must write out and in LinkedIn. And again, not the minus works in Google, but not here. Always use capitals. And whereas you can do wildcard searches in Google, that does not work on LinkedIn. So just a few things for you to be mindful of here. So what I like to do, once you've worked across all your assumptions, you've got the answers to all of the different criteria using that HubSpot template, I like to have a nice one-pager that you can pop up onto the wall. And it just makes everything really clear so that you've got that in front of you. And this is a one that we've pulled together for Claire. She has a favorite color. And we've done goals and values where they get their information, a little bit of key information about her here, challenges and pain points, and objections to the purchase. So you could change these around to suit your particular needs, but we always like to have a photograph to make that customer profile real. Now, all of this is, of course, based on your assumptions, and that can be a tricky place to be, because ideally we'd like to base this on evidence. So what I am suggesting, once you have done that, is that you select a range of typical customers that represent typical customers from each of your groups, and you take the time to go out and interview them. I really think this is probably the most valuable part of this whole process. So please try to make time to do that. It gives you facts and evidence that allows you to go back and refine your customer profiles. So from each of the target groups, and maybe 3 target groups is the most I would recommend you start with, pick 2 to 3 customers from each group. Prepare a questionnaire, so some rough questions that you would like to ask, and use those as a prompt. Don't read from a script when you're doing these interviews. It's nice if you can do it in person, but it's equally acceptable to do it over Zoom or Skype or WhatsApp or whatever you prefer. Book a time slot. I usually don't make it more than 15 or 20 minutes. Keep it short and stick to the time. Respect their time and make sure you don't overrun. I always ask permission to record the session. I've not had anybody say no as yet, and I always destroy the recordings afterwards. And once you have been through that interview session, you've been through the recording, I tend to transcribe them, and you can get software that does it for you, or you can do it yourself or send it off to a touch typist to transcribe for you. I then take that transcript, I mark out the keywords, the key phrases, quotations, maybe some testimonials. I pick out the aspirations aspirations, the challenges, their preferences, and I go back to the profile and I use all of that information to refine the profile. So keywords and phrases, testimonials and case studies. Make sure you're asking people when you interview them whether they have any images they'd be happy to share. If you are meeting in person, perhaps you could take a quick shot, always a useful one to do. You pull out their aspirations and anxieties, you ask them about their communications preferences, you ask where you can find them, who else they might know that they could actually recommend you to is also a good question to ask. And this will give you your core marketing messages and a preferred communications approach to them, really critical. And above all, shy bairns getting out, we say, it's a really good idea to use this session to say, well, you know, if you really valued the work that we did, I wonder, do you know anybody that you think might be interested in our services or our products? Ask for referrals and recommendations. That is a really, really valuable process. So that was a chunky section. What I'd like to do now is invite Helen to let me know where we are in terms of Q&As. Helen, over to you.
We've got a few more this time, Norma.
I thought we might
questions
have.
from Joe. Just saying, have you got any recommendations of how to get interviews with key clients? Are there any approaches that you would advise, Norma?
I find that if you stress a few things, you view them as being real go-to experts, sort of, you know, great examples of successful, experienced people in their field, or somebody that you really value. People love sharing their experiences and their expertise. The one thing that we are all really short of is time. So I think making sure that you're saying, listen, it's 15 minutes, 20 minutes maximum, and sticking to time, and that you are prepared to do it at any point in time, I think is a really good thing to do. And actually, sometimes I actually share what we're doing and offer to do that the other way around. You know, if they're interested in the process and what you're doing, then you could actually potentially even offer a little bit of horse trading, or to do something useful for them in return.
Makes sense, Norma. And in terms of, this might be a bit more technical, this one, Norma. Karen's asking, do you know of any software that can help transcribe the recorded interviews into text?
I used to use something called Dragon software. And I know it was one of the better ones, but it's quite a while since I've actually used that. So a good one for me to go off actually and do a little bit of search on, Helen.
Yeah.
There are lots and lots of different times, but no brands are springing types. There's no brand springing to mind at the minute. So let's include that in some of the Q&A stuff that we give out, and I'll do some research on speech to text software. Good question. Thank you.
Diane's asking, she's saying most of her customers are individuals, Norma, so she decorates weddings and events. How can she use LinkedIn to assist her in that scenario? Because she knows she should target companies for events, but most of her work's actually through individuals.
Yeah. And I think probably her way of targeting is more through content, and the great content that she's sharing, and we'll be doing more on that, because obviously, you know, people who are on LinkedIn are getting married and you know, organizing weddings and such like. So I still think it's a great place for her to be engaging and sharing some of the stuff that she's doing, because anybody that's actually thinking about getting married or planning a wedding is certainly going to notice that type of content on LinkedIn. And I think possibly, as she's already doing, I'm sure, targeting the supply chain to people who support, you know, weddings and marriages is a good tack. And looking at the types of customers that they are connected to. So building connections with people who are part of that supply chain means that she'll be getting some of her messages out to their audiences as well, which I think will be powerful.
Perfect. Thank you, Norma. Nicola's saying in B2B, often your top target customers are competitors of each other.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have any guidance on declaring this potential conflict? So I think what she's talking about here is a pitching stage or winning the business, and how much business should one customer give your organisation before you agree to exclude yourself from their top competitors?
Oh gosh, that is a hard question, isn't it? I mean, it's such a fine balancing act, and it's so different from sector to sector and company to company. Personally, actually, I just had an approach from a LinkedIn trainer in the UK at the weekend, saying, wow, what you're doing looks interesting. And I said, wow, what you're doing looks really interesting. And technically, these people are competitors, but I keep really close with them. And, you know, I'm quite open source, and I will share, and we'll sometimes have scrum downs and compare and contrast. We have our developer groups that we go out to, and yes, they're competitors, but I tend to keep competitors close and have a dialogue with them as well. That doesn't work in every sector, but I think my recommendation would be talk to them, keep an eye on them. You know, you might want to keep a respectful distance. However, I do firmly believe may the best man or woman win. So I'm not sure that I would be volunteering to dip out of any competitive exercise in deference to someone else. I think you win your work fairly and squarely, if indeed that's what she meant to say.
Yeah, I'm not sure if it was more from a stance where if she's going after two businesses that are actually competitors of each other. So they're her customers, both
Right,
her customers, and one maybe won't work with her if she's already working with that other customer.
Yeah, I get you. I think that's a fact of life, isn't it? And it's a commercial decision as to whether you want to give exclusivity to any particular company. I think if you were thinking about doing that, I'd be wanting to have a plan B up my sleeve just in case.
Yeah,
it certainly is a tricky one, and a lot of my customers do that. They give exclusive agreements to people for a specific product or a specific area, but I think it needs a lot of consideration.
Thanks, Norma. We've just had a couple of people that have missed the HubSpot link, Norma.
Oh, okay.
To the customer personas.
Let me just go back. We will send it out. There you go. I'll leave that on the screen so that you can jot that down. And I mean, if you just Google HubSpot customer personas, it will bring up lots of information. They've got a lot of really, really useful content up there that's well worth reading.
Thanks, Norma. That's great. We've got Karen asking, should you do the client interviews yourself, or is it best for an assistant to do the interviews in case clients don't want to say things directly to you?
That's such a good question. Yeah, I like to see somebody independent doing that, because in the interview you can get such a lot of rich information out of those discussions. And you're absolutely right. Often people will tell you what they think you want to hear, but there's a reluctance sometimes to share the things that weren't as good, that didn't go down as well, where they had problems. So I've done client interviews for customers where they've talked about significant issues for them that they hadn't even told the customer about. Now, I went back, shared it, they had a conversation. Within 3 weeks and it was actually an international recruitment company, they were then delivered a huge contract because they'd resolved this problem that they didn't even know about. So where possible, I would always get someone independent to do it, but it must be somebody who's got some experience doing interviewing, because they need to be good listeners. They need to be able to ask open questions, not lead the client, and to understand how to get the best value out of that interview. So it's always good to find someone who knows a bit about communication and about getting the best from people in a conversation.
Yeah, thanks, Norma. We've got Stephen saying you like the QR code idea. How does he get one?
LinkedIn gives you one automatically, Stephen. So if you follow the beginning where you go up into the search bar and you've got the little 4 squares, just press on there and it will automatically tell you what your QR code is. You don't need to do anything, just find it on LinkedIn. And if you're still stuck, go to the help section and type in my QR code and it'll show you how to get it. But you can only get it on your mobile.
Thanks, Norma. Josh is asking, Norma, can the customer profiles, which are not companies, be used for customer groups such as landlords, property owners?
Yes.
Perfect. That answers that one.
Yes, simple one. Yes, absolutely. And I think a great group of people to profile.
Fab.
Sure. Yeah.
Thanks, Norma. Davidson, this is going back to sort of some of the profile work, Norma. Is there a sheet in the workbook that tells you what to do on your profile and on the about section, etc.? You can't see it in the workbook so far.
It's some of the slides are in there, but it's in the slide deck that was sent out afterwards, all of the different elements that make up that great looking profile. So there is a checklist in there, yes. Great. But you might need to go back and just look through the slide deck that we sent out as well, or listen to the recording, which if you missed it, Helen, I don't know whether you'd be able to send the recording out to.
I was going to say, I'll be popping in the links to our YouTube channels, Digital Knowledge Exchange and Digital Drive County Durham, where they'll be able to look back on all these webinars as well. So I'll pop that in shortly after our chat, Norma. So it's just a couple more. Is it okay to copy recommendations from LinkedIn to your website? If so, are there any tools that can help automate this, Norma?
Oh, that was a question from last week, wasn't it? Yes, I think it is, because it's public information. So I don't see any issue with taking a LinkedIn recommendation and using it elsewhere. If I do that, however, I usually always go back to the individual and ask/tell them and just check that it's okay. There isn't anything I'm aware of that will do that on an automated basis.
Right. Thanks, Norma. I've got someone asking, who should content creators target? So I'm assuming this is maybe someone from general, maybe it's a digital marketing company, or don't have any clarification on that.
And I mean, it depends what type of organization the content creators are working in, or maybe they are creating content for clients, in which case you're looking for the customers, intermediaries and influencers who are prevalent in that particular sector, in that particular arena. So you're always looking for the people who are the go-to experts in their field for the particular area that you are working in.
Yeah, thanks, Norma. We've got Noriko asking, would it be a good idea to add hashtags in the about section in the profile?
You can do. Some people add them at the bottom. Mine and a lot of my colleagues who train at LinkedIn, their recommendation is no more than 3 hashtags, so don't go mad.
Fabulous, thank you, Norma. Alex has just put in, there's a voice-to-text website app called otter.ai, so that's quite helpful. We'll take a look at that, Alex. Okay. Thank you. Yeah, that's great. And Stephen says thank you. He's managed to get his QR code.
Brilliant. Well done, Stephen. Good man.
Excellent.
Okay, shall we crack on then, Helen?
Perfect. Yep, no problem, Norma. Thank you.
Fabulous. Thank you. Talk to you shortly. I'm just going to whiz forward here. So that was brilliant. So now I'd like to look at actually connecting with people on LinkedIn. And now that you know who your A-listers are and you've profiled them and you've done your interviews, is actually looking at how we can connect to them. And you've got a number of targeting options on LinkedIn. And the premise on LinkedIn is that actually you shouldn't really be going out to ask anyone for a connection unless you know them or you've met them. So, you know, it's a bit like cold calling. They don't want you to be going out and making approaches to people that you don't know. So obviously your first level connections, you can message and talk and communicate with them as much as you wish. They're people that I am directly connected with. So Helen and I, we've sent each other invitations, we've accepted them. So we're first level connections. Helen knows Aubrius, I didn't, and I would therefore view Aubrius as my second degree connection because I know him through Helen. And then Paul, if we weren't connected, knows Aubrius, he would be a third level connection. So it's 1, 2, 3 steps removed from that first degree connection. Now, in terms of second and third level connections, you shouldn't really be approaching those people with a connection request unless you actually know them or have met them. And it's an interesting one because if you do send an invitation request and that person then clicks on no, I don't want to connect with that person, something pops up for them saying, I don't know this person, or report them for abuse. And if people click too many times on that I don't know this person, you get a little black mark back at Wrench LinkedIn. So if you are going to go out with connection requests to second or third degree connections, in order to avoid that I don't know this person response, you need to be crafting personalized messages that look genuine and authentic, that will inspire people to approve the connection request. Otherwise, if you continue reaching out to people that you really don't know, you may actually find that blacklist will start compromising your performance on LinkedIn. And I actually had a chap who had been off on an exhibition in the Middle East, and he came back one weekend and sat down and rattled 500 connections into his LinkedIn. And by Monday morning, LinkedIn had frozen his account and said, what are you doing? So they are looking for authentic networking. And obviously putting 500 people into your connections is not typical behavior. So they came back, requested more information. He told them what had been happening, and they opened up his LinkedIn profile obviously after that. But this needs to be genuine, authentic networking. So you're looking, if you are reaching out to people that you don't strictly speaking know, we're looking to craft a very personalized, tailored connection request. If you are a premium account holder and the prices are between $29.99 and $79.99 upwards for Sales Navigator, you will get a number of in-mails as part of your premium account, and they allow you to then approach people that you don't know, and they tend to be a more commercial type of approach, and we'll come on to in-mails during this session. If you are a member of a group, you can actually start communicating and targeting people within groups as well, which can be quite useful. So I have got a second degree connection here in Lithuania, as it turned out, called Remigius. Wanted to connect with him. So I click on his profile under Connect on the laptop, and it brings up this box, invite Remigius to connect. And in that box, you will see here, I've got 300 characters. Now, I'm going to tailor a personal message. So I have looked at his profile and I've written this message. It would be my pleasure and privilege to connect with you. I've previously worked with Sandra Kundrota at the British Chambers of Commerce, who's now advisor to the Chancellor. I'm looking forward to my next business trip to Vilnius, one of my favourite capital cities in Europe. Best wishes, Norma. Now, Remigius happens to be the mayor of Vilnius, and I have therefore used a slightly more formal tone and approach and crafted a personal message because we've got a contact in common. So hopefully that will encourage him to be more ready to connect with me. And you will see here that I've used 281 characters with spaces of the 300 allocation. And if you write that message in Word, down in the bottom left-hand corner of Word, it will give you the word number. And if you click on that, it will actually bring up the word count and it will give you the actual spaces. So if you want to, you can craft these messages in Word and then cut and paste them across. It does sometimes take quite a lot of time to craft a really good message in LinkedIn. And I just wanted to tell you a little bit of a story here first, but just remind you that you should be checking out the profile first and making sure that this is a really personal response that matches the style and the tone and approach of their profile, essentially. So this chap, David Sabucci, is a very eminent and very well connected person in business in Canada. And I found out about David through connections at the Department for International Trade and thought he would be a great person to connect with. I didn't want to send an email. I wanted to send a 300 connection request. And I just thought, how can I get David to really recognize me, to agree to a connection, and then to continue the conversation with me? Because I realized he was somebody that could really help connect me into lots of different organizations in Canada. So I did a little bit of research and found out on his profile that David had written a book about growing up in Canada as a young Japanese boy. So I bought his book on Amazon. It cost me about £10, I think, and read it, and wow, what a lovely book. Apart from anything else, that's a picture of David on the front there. And I crafted a short 300 character message, mentioned the book, how much I'd loved it, and that I was focusing on Canada for my business development and would love to connect with him. He got back to me with a really long message within 40 minutes. So, you know, there's the power of story, the power of really authentically connecting in with people. David and I have stayed in touch ever since then. He's been a great connection and we've done quite a lot of sharing and caring. So take the time to view your connections, profiles, take the time to craft messages, because as Seth Godin says, you know, there's a dashboard running, you can get led astray by the number of connections you've got. It's not about the number, it's about the quality. It's about those authentic connections and the value that you are able to add to other people and the value that you're able to add to them second. That is the most important aspect of this. So if you are developing quality connections, make sure that you are getting the best from those connections. Now, in terms of in-mails, and this is actually a chap who is connected to David Sabucci in Ontario, who I found at the weekend, and he'd be somebody really interesting to connect to. Now, he's in business development and project management, so obviously somebody that I'd like to send an in-mail message to as a premium member. So this might be interesting for you if you are thinking of going premium. Just bear in mind, you do get a free trial. So if you are thinking about upgrading to premium, do the free trial first, and then you can see whether that's worthwhile for you. But generally, Basic will deliver most of the things that you need to get a good result on LinkedIn. But I want to just run through the in-mail service here with you. So you click on more, and it will, on message rather, and it brings up this new message screen. Now, it's only available in premium services. You used to be able to buy these as a basic member individually, and they cost £6.75. But now they're only available in premium. You get a certain number depending on the service that you take. So as a business premium, I get 15 per month. You do not need a connection with someone to send them an in-mail. And if you send an in-mail, a reminder is sent if they don't respond within 3 days. Now, if that individual responds to that in-mail message that you send, and this is how LinkedIn guarantees quality, you will be credited back that in-mail as long as the response happens within that 90-day period. So LinkedIn are trying to encourage good behavior here with in-mails. In your title, which is critical, you have 200 characters to write a really impactful title. And in the body of the in-mail, you've got 1900 characters. If you are doing a lot of business development and you want to buy more in-mails, then they will cost you $10 per in-mail over your allocations. So possibly not worth it. You may consider upgrading to a higher level for a period of time and then dropping back down afterwards, which is also possible. But for those of you a bit more serious about sales and business development, that might actually be something that you would like to think about. So in order to get responses from the people that you really want to be connecting with, this is all about showing you care, looking at their profile and crafting messages in that connection request or in those in-mails or in group scenarios that resonate, that hit home, that are genuine, heartfelt and authentic. So with individuals, maybe as I did with Sandra Kundrota and David's connection request, you can mention mutual connections or even ask for referrals or recommendations. It may well be that you are following the same people on LinkedIn and you can have a chat about a recent article. Maybe you went to the same school or university. Perhaps you share a location, or actually, Karen, hi, if you're here today with us. I was chatting to a lady from the Northeast who is actually living in Dubai at the moment and is coming into our webinars, which is particularly exciting. So maybe you share a location in common. Perhaps you've worked for similar companies in the past, or you have skills or expertise in common. You are in the same groups or share common interests, whether that's sport or leisure interests or meditation or dancing or whatever your particular thing is. It may well be that you have a love and a passion for the same influencers and you can start chatting about that, or you're doing similar charitable work. Friends of mine, their son had young 9-year-old son had a heart transplant, and I recently contacted on behalf of clients the owner of a food company down in Leicester who supported the organ transplant cause, and we got chatting about that on LinkedIn, and that led, although it was very genuine and heartfelt, the messaging, but actually it opened up the door and meant that we could get in there and start talking to them about business issues. So it can be a really interesting one. And of course, looking at people's content, what they're creating, what they're sharing, what they're interested in is really valuable. When you're looking at companies and looking for hooks there to support that conversation, Again, you know, looking at employees, you will see on LinkedIn when you look at company pages, there are current employees and people you're connected with, or people who have previously worked at the organization that you may well know. We've talked about competitors, and do you have competitors in common, or do you know some of the competitors? Are they hiring? Often, particularly on a Sunday evening, which tends to be when people are looking at these things, I will just share people putting out job notices, etc., which could be really useful, or send out job notices to people who I know are looking for new positions. The company may have moved or be expanding and have a story to tell. And if you are on premium, actually it's worth mentioning that you will get more data and insights into the status of the company, their performance, etc. So that's worth bearing in mind. Are they in growth or are they in decline? Looking at a company's values and seeing if there are some shared values there can be interesting, and also having a look through who's following that company. And is there a way in there? Do you have followers in common? And again, what products or services, you may want to comment on that, particularly if they're doing a new product launch. And again, checking out what kind of content the company is creating or sharing. And all of this research, looking for those hooks, looking for those common areas of conversation, are equally important and valuable and valid for people you know and for people you don't know, and perhaps the people you don't know even more so. And you need to find a good balance there of you know, being supportive and not being too intrusive. So I think, again, looking for something really authentic. So the final part in this section that I want to share with you is if you are looking to connect on mobile. And here we've got a screen grab of a mobile device. If you click on connect, and this is changing slowly on LinkedIn, often it will send off one of those automated messages. LinkedIn is thankfully changing that now, but not everybody will have that updated technology. So if you click on more, if you find that's happening for you, you've got the personalized invitation icon there, and you can go in and write your 300-character message. Here we have Ira Bass. He's a first-degree connection. When I click on more here, LinkedIn have just now added 2 new sections to this in terms of sharing profile on LinkedIn, but they have just introduced recently sharing profile through other channels. So you will also be able to send that out by email or on send a link on WhatsApp or other resources. So it's worth watching out for that as well. So we know that people who really personalize and tailor those connection requests get a 60% higher response rate, which is well worth the extra effort. So, Helen, chunky section, that one, lots of things to think about. How we're doing on the questions score?
I think we're all right, Norma. I don't think we've got any questions in at the moment. We're all clear, I think.
Fabulous. Well, I'm glad to hear that, and that everybody's keeping up to speed. Is there anyone who wants to raise their hand or ask anything now before I go into the final session? No.
No, I think
we're all good. Brilliant. All right, Helen, thank you. So you're connected. You've got that connection. They've approved your first-degree connection with those people. Then what? And we know that, you know, there'll be a 70% higher conversion rate from connection to doing business if someone comes back with an inquiry or a request if you're following up on those leads within an hour. And on average, from getting a request for products or services, people take up to 50% of people take up to 5 days. So speed of responses and getting back to people quickly is really, really important when it comes down to how you are following through with people. So the $1 million question is, are you following up with your new connections? You've sent out an invitation, somebody comes back to you, they've approved your request, then what? And LinkedIn is now getting smarter, and they're prompting you to come through and actually strike up a conversation, and you will see they actually make some suggestions. So take the bull by the horns. Now is the time, based on the research you've done and the hooks you've looked up, is to actually start going through to those connections and striking up the conversation. So are you doing that after making a request to connect that's being improved? And if not, please do so. If they are reaching out to you, are you responding quickly? Because getting back to them quickly is absolutely paramount. Remember, if you get back to people within an hour, if you can manage that, or certainly within the same day, you will get a more positive and more impactful response from them. Are you making tailored and personal responses? Are you striking up a conversation and going through with something meaningful? And what I really try to do here is either be generous with your expertise or your resources. Have you got something that you can give, whether that's a piece of content, whether it's some suggestions, or whether you say, oh, I noticed on a post that you'd written that you're looking for XYZ. I have just the thing that I can recommend, this person, that person, or this resource, just as someone's come through with otter.ai, which is a brilliant tip. Sometimes I look out for tenders or business opportunities and will send those through to people as well. So what have you got that you can give to people that is being generous, but not you trying to sell to them? I think that's the key thing that you want to be avoiding at this stage until you've developed the relationship further. Have you got something valuable to give or share? So some things there to really think about. The critical thing to bear in mind is that once you have a connection request, don't immediately wade in with a sales pitch. Networking is there to network. It's there to start building and developing a relationship, not to immediately wade in and start selling. So Gary Vaynerchuk says for every 100 pushes, you get 1 pull. So a 10-1 or 101 ratio, however that might feel comfortable for you. So try and resist that urge. If people do that with me, generally, pending how they do it, I would just go in and remove the connection. So tread carefully and look to really starting up a conversation with that person. You might want to, ask a question. If you're not able to give, people are often flattered that you're asking them to share some of their expertise or experiences. What I do is, obviously, as we've been talking about, review the profile for hooks, and also think about this aspect of, what's a good hit rate for you, because I'm going to be asking you to think about, benchmarking what you're doing at the moment and how many conversions are you getting. If you're making 20 connections in a week, how many of those would you actually like to convert into conversations? Because, are you going to invite them for a virtual coffee for 10 or 15 minutes? Are you going, once lockdown's over, of course, to try and actually meet somewhere so that you can have a face-to-face conversation, or arrange a longer online meeting? So how does that conversion look like for you? And are you taking this offline? Are you keeping it on LinkedIn? Are you using some online resources to actually develop that relationship? It's and obviously the follow-up is really important. And be patient and take care. This is not necessarily something to rush. It's really about step by step building up a quality, meaningful relationship. And test different approaches with different customer groups and different people. It sometimes takes a little bit of time to actually get used to this and find a formula that really works for you. And before we wrap up for today, there's one resource that I'd like to share with you that is absolutely stunning and has been so valuable for me and the work that I do on LinkedIn. And it's a resource called Crystal Knows, www.crystalknows.com. And essentially what this does is it will, based on a first degree connection, and you'll see over here on the right hand side, this is my LinkedIn. It's got a little tab, and I can't see it because the chat box is view personality, it says in there. It has a little tab on there, and you get a free version of Crystal Knows that will give you 10 free trials of this profiling piece of software, essentially. So you know, you can have a go for free before you actually commit to it. So when I'm on David's profile, I click on view personality, and it, on the right hand side, it brings up a quick view of David and his, essentially his style and his communication preferences. David tends to engage with new people quickly, especially when discussing a mutual excitement for the future. And it then has various different sections like I need to call David, I need to email David, I need to meet David, to do a raft of different things. And you can click on the Get Advice button down here, and it will give you lots of different suggestions for approaches, for the tone, what David likes or doesn't like. And here you will see the, and that's just a bigger screen grab of that particular section. On here, there is a view full profile there. And you can also print this, PDF it, send it out to people. And if you click on view profile, it brings up the whole profile. At the top, it tells you David tends to engage with new people quickly, etc., etc. His top 3 words: enthusiastic, casual, and open, which is certainly my experience of communicating with David from the outset. You will see a personality comparison chart. That is mine compared to David, so you can see how close or how far apart you are in terms of personality and style. This is a little bit like based on psychometric profiling. Crystal Knows is astonishingly accurate. It does need a certain amount of content to go at, and incredibly helpful in you crafting good communications. They say that it's got about a 70 to 80% accuracy rate. They don't reveal their full algorithms, but it is a very clever piece of software. It gives you a disk type, and it then will give you the lowdown of what comes naturally to David. It gives you a conversation coach. I need to call David to brainstorm ideas with him, personality playbooks, and lots of different things there. So check out crystalknows.com, have a play with it before next week. For me, it has completely transformed the way I engage with people who I don't know. With people where, you know, we, on that personality comparison, we may be quite distant in terms of our natural styles. And it's really helped me to craft messages and approaches to people that get conversions. So have a play with Crystal Knows and see how you get on with it. Finally, in terms of approaches that can really be engaging, if you're not aware of this, I wanted to go through to Claire Snowdon and thank her for the message that she sent to me. And I've clicked on the little icon down at the bottom here because I wanted to send a voice message rather than sending a typed message. and you just click on the click on that, hold it to make the recording, and then click on send. So super, super easy to do that, guys. And you will see the recording has gone through, and Claire will be able to receive that and play it back. So we're all familiar with that on different bits of software, but I think something for you perhaps to get more used to doing on LinkedIn. It's a little bit more personal, so you can give that a try out as well before next week. So, engaging with new connections, send a welcome message when they've accepted your request. Make sure you're reviewing the profile for hooks. Make sure that you are fully sharing content with them that you know from your customer profile and really will be of interest and value to them. See if you can actually take that relationship offline, offering them a virtual coffee, scheduling a call, and there's some great scheduling resources actually that you could use to do that, that you might wish to include in your LinkedIn profile. You could make introductions to contacts that could be useful to them. You could be sharing news and advice that's useful for them, so giving rather than trying to sell. And you might want to ask them for expert advice, which is always flattering and helpful. And finally, just bear in mind those voicemail messages that you can send as well. And make sure you're keeping a tab on all of your new connections, on the communications, and that you have patience and just keep dropping in useful things to these people, building up that relationship. So I tend to keep a tally of all the people that I'm communicating with and just trying to bring on board a bit more week by week and month by month, and make sure that these are part of your communication and client engagement processes. So that is the session for today. Lots for you to think about. Helen, how are we doing with questions before we go into the action planning?
Yeah, we've got a couple of questions, please, Norma. Sarah's asking, how can you tell if you have asked to connect with someone or they've asked to connect to you so you can adapt the right response?
Well, if you send an invitation to someone, it will, until they approve that request, it will say pending, but you will get a message back through in your notifications, which is the little bell in the top navigation bar, actually saying that someone has responded to your request. So if you're not at the laptop when that comes through or on your mobile, you can go back through and look at those notifications and it tells you that they've been accepted. So that's a good time to follow up.
Thanks, Norma. I've got David asking, what do you feel about connection and follow-up etiquette? You've seen a lot of people saying something vague as a connection request, then he gets hit with sort of a blatant sales follow-up pitch within moments.
I remove the connection. I'm quite brutal, Helen, as I mentioned previously. We don't go to networking events and enjoy people coming up saying, oh, I'm a financial advisor on this, that, and the other, or I'm a pensions expert, or I sell X, Y, Z. Do you want to buy my stuff? We're there to network. So I tend to remove connections if people come straight in with a hard sell. I don't like it. I think it's personal for everyone, but I think we need to find, which is what this is all about, smarter ways of getting into conversation with people and giving rather than selling.
Yeah, completely agree, Norma. Karen's saying after connecting with someone, she automatically requests to meet for a coffee, which I think is quite a nicer approach, isn't it, than coming in with a big sales pitch.
Yeah, it is, sure. And, you know, maybe sometimes do that virtually, particularly at the minute. I always joke about, I'll bring the coffee, you bring the virtual chocolate biscuits. And just say, you know, 10, 15 minutes, just, you know, minding that people sometimes time's really short. And it's much easier to ask for small commitments. And if that 10, 15 minutes then goes into an hour because it's really useful, great. Or you can arrange to have a second meeting after that.
Perfect. Thanks, Norma. Pamela's asking, have you ever used Keyword Surfer for keywords? That must be a...
Yes, it's a decent enough tool. There are lots of different ones out there. And just worth a mention as well, in the premium, you know, that keyword suggestion tool is also really valuable. So yes, I mean, if anybody wants to, in the chat and the Q&A, if you want to share any particular keyword tools that you've had success with, then please, that's all useful resources for everybody, because there's a lot of different ones to choose from.
There is. That's great. I think most things have been answered. Paul is asking, is there a place where you can view your most recent or new connections, Norma?
Yes, on the navigation bar, if you go to connections and you click on there, you can actually go in and sort the connections that you have in different ways, and recently added connections is one of those filters.
Perfect. That's great.
In the black bar at the top, you've got a tab that says connections. Just click on that and it will take you in.
Wonderful. David's saying he's been approached by a company who say they can automate connections and follow-ups. His inclination is to avoid automation with LinkedIn.
Oh, no, don't do it. No, no. This is about genuine, authentic conversation. So honestly, I wouldn't go there. The numbers game gets you nowhere.
No.
Don't do it. Don't do it.
Don't do it. Okay. One more question, Norma. Sarah's saying, how do you deal with those that do not connect? Can you unsend, or do you just leave it?
You can. No, you can. From LinkedIn, you get 3,000 invitations at any one point in time. And if you are prolific and you've sent out 3,000 invitations, you can go back to LinkedIn and ask them for more. You can, however, go into your connections again and look at who's in there who hasn't responded, and you can withdraw the invitation to connect if you want to. I don't, and it's fascinating. You know, some people after a year or two suddenly wake up and think, oh, I'll go through my LinkedIn connections. I mean, I did a huge exercise for Craft Scotland in January, and we were preparing people to go over to an exhibition in New York, and I connected with loads of people in art galleries and museums and archives and all sorts of things. And you would be amazed at how many responses to the invitation connections I've had during the lockdown when they've had time on their hands. So I just leave them up there, but if you want to remove them, and that's fine.
Perfect. Have we got time for one more, Norma?
Oh,
right. Alison's in, do you keep a record of all your connections, and what kind of information do you record?
If I think that connection is a prospect in terms of a real good business opportunity, I then transfer that contact into Capsule as a prospect, and I will record all sorts of useful information. It keeps a track of emails, etc. But I also record when we've met, when we've talked, key points, you know, if they've got a pet dog and what its name is, if their dog freaks, you know, what they're interested in business. I mean, it just depends, all sorts of information. If you do go premium, then some of this CRM, customer relationship management stuff, you can actually record in Sales Navigator, which is really useful. I think it's a question of, you know, if you were ringing somebody up, do you want to be able to say, did you have a great 50th birthday celebration, or how was the trip to Hawaii, or, you know, you told me that you were off to an exhibition, did it go well, or how did the launch of the new product go, or whatever it is. So it's that type of thing where you want to show people that you've remembered, you've been thinking about them, and you care about them. I think that's the important stuff.
Oh, that's fabulous. Too right, Norma. I think that's it in terms of our questions, Norma.
Great, fabulous. So very quickly then, in terms of actions for next week, planning your 12 minutes a day, and putting in the effort to get the preparation done now, and then looking at implementation and measurement, which will be super easy, so much slicker, so much easier to manage, and of course so much more productive. So in your workbook, you can jot down some actions. What I'd like you to think about this week is setting some of your LinkedIn goals, because we've been through quite a lot on LinkedIn now. And on page 4, where you can jot down your social selling index and maybe some of your benchmarks, just start thinking about, now we're getting to lead generation and building up connections and, you know, doing that business development thing in terms of converting leads. Before next week, if you are coming on next week's webinar, and I hope you are, because it's going to be a really good one, you know, what sorts of goals would you like to set for your LinkedIn activities? You know, if you want 5 new contracts a month, for example, how many connections does that mean you're going to have to make? How many meetings will you have to have? And, you know, are these goals and objectives smart? And you may want to think about goals around content and content creation, etc. So something there for you to think about. So just as a recap, we've got your profile sorted out. We've done your customer database analysis. You're going to have a look at that this week. Your customer profiling, make sure you get to grips with that. If you have got the time, see if you could even have a go at doing 1 or 2 interviews with really good customers. You're going to practice some advanced searches, and you're going to have a play with, hopefully, Crystal Knows. See if that works for you. You get 10 free grows on Crystal Knows, and start using that to shape some really heartfelt, impactful, meaningful communications that resonates with the preferred style and approaches of the people that you are messaging and communicating with. Now, if you have any questions between this week and next week, I will respond as best possible, as long as you message me on LinkedIn, and give you a little bit of pointers or a little bit of help and feedback. And that's me. Thank you very much. Been great to be with you, Helen. Thanks.
Thank you, Norma. Can we just ask one more before we go, Norma?
Sure.
But Alistair, I must apologise because I skipped over his question earlier. So apologies, Alistair. He's asking, is it okay to copy recommendations from your LinkedIn to your website?
Yes, I think it is. But as mentioned, I think best practice is just for you to pick up the phone or message them saying, thanks ever so much for the recommendation you gave on LinkedIn. Are you happy for me to use it on the website? I don't think you have to, because it's all public information, but I would recommend that you do so. And who knows, if you ring those people up, you might get chatting, you might be able to do an interview with them, and you might even get a new bit of business from them.
Perfect. Thank you ever so much. And I'm sure everyone will agree it's been another really insightful session, Norma. I've learned loads of things, and I will certainly have a look at that Crystal Knows as well, because I haven't used it yet. So that's
amazing.
fabulous.
It's so interesting.
But
yeah.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
Our 3rd instalment for Norma is next Monday. That's the 18th, and that's at 10 to 12. Tomorrow we've got how to get started with video marketing for beginners, and that's with Pascal Fintoni. And on Thursday this week, we've also got blogging tips and tricks with Fleek Marketing. So do join us this week for any other webinars that you may find of interest. And like I say, we will make sure that all of today's Q&As get sent out, as well as the slide deck and links to our other webinars as well. So thank you very much. And Norma, thank you once again. That's great.
You're very welcome. My pleasure, Helen. Have a fab week, everybody. Thank you.
Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye.